Listen, Niladri.
Good morning. Good morning. My thanks to Melow for this conference. My thanks to the faculty of the Department of English, Dibrugarh University, um, young scholars, faculty members, friends. I decided to call my presentation at a slight angle, querying desire, querying texts. This particular expression at a slight angle is a quotation. It's a quotation from another very famous queer writer, E.M. Forster. And he had said this about a very famous Greek poet whom Forster discovered, namely Constantine Cavafy. Now, Constantine Cavafy led a very humdrum, boring life. And what we actually find in Constantine Cavafy is that he led an extremely understated life. Nobody took much notice of him. He was quietly writing poetry, some of it very short. It was only when Constantine Cavafy was discovered by E.M. Forster and then subsequently taken up by W.H. Auden that people in the English-speaking world began to know about him. And E.M. Forster's description of Constantine Cavafy was that here is a man who stands at a slight angle to the world. So I am going to use that particular expression at a slight angle to try and understand how queerness works. Because very often we tend to fall into a kind of binary, queer as opposed to straight. And that is an incredibly wrong binary to have, because queerness, and I cannot stress it often enough, queerness is not an identity. Queerness is a politics. So therefore, anybody and everybody can be queer. Nobody is queer, we do queer. So what we are actually going to talk about is a certain politics of reading. It is a certain politics of not only creating culture, but it is also a certain politics of looking at culture. And when we look at culture, we are going to look at culture as it were against the grain. See, that is another problem with the expression against the grain. Because the moment you're saying against the grain, you are again, you're assuming some kind of an oppositionality. So there is the grain and there is against the grain. Us versus them. You versus me. And that is precisely the kind of confrontation that queerness is not interested in. Queerness works at an angle. And I think those of us who've done an etymological, study of the word queer, you will know that the origin of the word queer is the German queer or queer, and that actually means, if you translate it into English, it means athwart, at an angle. So therefore, not in opposition. How does this work? Very often I find that whenever we are talking about queer literature or queer reading, we tend to have a very shortcut attitude towards queer scholarship. We tend to focus on some authors who have produced identifiably LGBTQ plus material. The names are obvious. Mahesh Dattani, R. Raj Rao, yes? So therefore, Sunitinam Joshi. The names trip off our tongue with ease. We talk about life writing, we talk about trans narratives, again, Lakshminarayan Tripathi. The names are very, very easily available. That kind of scholarship, I would like to suggest, is not going to be helpful in the long run. And the reason why they're not going to be helpful in the long run is because that kind of scholarship states the obvious. So you have a text that is identified as queer, your paper is this text is queer. It's like doing a feminist reading of the second sex. It's like doing a communist reading of Das Kapital. It's obvious. So what I would want to do is, if you are going to practice queer scholarship, don't look at the obvious texts. The obvious texts are there for people to familiarize themselves with. But if you're going to do queer reading, please look at texts that are hiding in plain sight. That is to say, texts that are not usually recognized as being queer, or authors who are not recognized as queer. So say, for example, when you are reading Indian queer literature, how many of you have looked at Ruskin Bond? Nobody. But there is an extraordinary tiny novel by Ruskin Bond called Delhi is Not Far. It's a fantastically queer text that is hiding in plain sight. Nobody notices it because Ruskin Bond has been bracketed as a children's writer. He writes children's books. But Ruskin Bond, I think, is one of the most interesting queer writers that we have, but nobody is going to talk about him as a queer writer. If we look at conventional English literature, many of us, I'm guessing, are from English literature. I remember when I was doing my master's at Jadavpur University about 100 years ago. I am that old, but very well preserved. Um, you can't tell. So when I was doing my master's at Jadavpur University, I remember there being a lot of nervous whispering when we were discussing the Canterbury Tales. The nervous whispering was not about any of the characters that we are usually talking about, the wife of Bath, etc., etc. It was about the pardoner. It was about the partner. Is he trans? Is he gay? Is he impotent? Yes? So therefore, does he have a penis? Doesn't he have a penis? Because, penis defines whether you're a human being or not. So therefore, if you have a penis, you're a human being. If you don't have a penis, well, we'll allow you to masquerade as a human being, but you'll never be a full human being until you have a penis. Okay, we've established that. So therefore, pardoner was an area of great anxiety. And then, of course, we have the greatest queer writer of all time, somebody called William Shakespeare. And there is endless debate as to whether William Shakespeare and Henry Risley, the Earl of Southampton, whether they were lovers or whether they were just good friends. Now here is the thing about being just good friends. If you're just good friends with somebody, you write 1 or 2 poems. Yeah. You don't write over 100 poems. Yes, by the time you've written your 99th poem, you're no longer just good friends. Something is happening there. And the one particular sonnet that people have consistently fought over, and there is a lot of blood on the academic floor, Sonnet 20, the master mistress of my affection. Master mistress. What does that mean? What does the term master mistress mean? Master and mistress? Now, I don't know whether you've seen portraits of the Earl of Southampton. You can actually Google it, and there are pictures. Renaissance was very, very famous for the miniature. Exactly at the same time when in India, we were having the Mughal miniature. So therefore, miniature as an art form is happening in 16th century in England, but it is also happening in the 16th century in India, same time. Now, if you look at the miniatures of the Earl of Southampton, you yourself would be thinking, what do I make of this? Because you see, his face is very sort of round and petite and all of that, and he's got this wonderful cascade of hair that is running down his left shoulder, and you think, oh, I see, master mistress, very Ardhanarishwar. Yeah? So therefore, Shakespeare was clearly addressing this man, sonnet number 20. And so therefore, what we are looking at is what Shakespeare is doing in that sonnet is he's playing what the scholar Will Stockton calls a difficult word game. And please understand that when queer scholars get into the act of queering, they are taking on a text that plays a difficult word game. Because a queer text will not offer up the meaning voluntarily. It has to be teased out. And it is the teasing out of the meaning which I think is something that we really have to do. What we are actually going to call out as queer scholars is heteronormativity. Now, what exactly is heteronormativity? How do we define it? Well, we have a fairly working definition of heteronormativity that is provided by Will Stockton. There are many other people who've defined heteronormativity. You already know the usual suspects are there. You've got David Halprin, you've got Lisa Duggan, you've got Eve Kosofsky-Sedgwick. So we know what heteronormativity is. But I would want to give you the definition that Will Stockton provides. And he says that heteronormativity is, and this is what I'm quoting from him, is the default presumption, very important words, the default presumption that romantic relationships are heterosexual until proven otherwise. So therefore, you are heterosexual until you are proven guilty of non-heterosexuality. That's the way it works. So therefore, everybody is innocent of homosexuality till they start wearing a rainbow scarf. Okay. So what we are then looking at is the way in which queer texts are relying all around us. Very, very recently, I came across a poem, and I'm so sorry that I wasn't aware of this poem before. Two very short poems by another writer who is not regarded as queer, and I think he would kill me if I called him queer, but I don't care. Robert Browning. Sir, Robert Browning, sir. Yes, sir, Robert Browning, sir. Because he wrote two very short poems. One is called Meeting at Night, and both these poems are available on Google, so you can download even as I speak. Meeting at Night. The other is Parting at Morning. So therefore, Meeting at Night, Parting at Morning. Why am I so interested in these two poems? Well, because it's clearly about two lovers who are meeting and then they're parting. This is the interesting thing. In the first poem, that is to say, Meeting at Night, no gender. No gender. You know that two people are meeting, but who is the male, who is the female? Are they two women? Are they two men? We don't know. And it is the indecidability of the gender of the people informed which makes the poem available for querying. We don't know. What makes it even stranger is in the companion poem, yes, which is Parting at Morning. You know that one of them is male, but the other person's gender is still unspecified. So do we automatically assume that it is male? Do we automatically assume that it's female? And therefore, heteronormativity lies in our assumption of heterosexuality. So therefore, the moment we start to look at them, very short two stanza poems, fantastically productive. Now, what we really are going to look at then is this is actually one of my favorite definitions of a queer text. This is a slightly longer sentence, so please bear with me. This is from Eve Kosowski Sedgwick, famously heterosexual, but she has provided the most wonderful definition of queerness. And she says, what is a text and how can it be read queerly? She says that such a text is an open mesh. Open mesh. It's an open mesh of, and I love all the adjectives that come afterwards, I mean the nouns that come afterwards. It's an open mesh of possibilities, gaps, overlaps, dissonances, and resonances, lapses and excesses of meaning when the constituent elements of anyone's gender, of anyone's sexuality, aren't made to signify monolithically. It's a big mouthful of a definition, but it works. So therefore, we are not going to make, I think the most important adjective over here is monolithically. We are not going to turn anybody's gender into a monolith. I very often ask my students if they know what is a man or who is a. Yesterday I got a couple of people, and I promise you I'll unfriend them. A couple of people yesterday wished me Happy International Men's Day. I apologize for those friends. I am so sorry that I have friends like these. Because I wanted to question them. I want to say, okay, please define man. That would have kept them up all night. But I was not in a mood to argue, so I said, same to you. Off you go. But really, who is a man? Is a man a gender? Is the man a chromosome? Because that is what a lot of people like to think. Sir, ultimately, sir, no matter how much you say, sir, that sexuality is fluid, sir, gender is fluid, sir, but sir, chromosome, sir. And I said, that is absolutely true. When a child is born and when the doctor tells you it's a boy or a girl, is the child's chromosome tested? I don't think so. Yeah. Something between the legs is looked at and the child is pronounced male or female. Depending upon the whatever lies between the legs, you distribute either laddus or you don't distribute anything. So therefore you save money, because the child who does not deserve laddus, that child will have to be taken care of financially later by way of dowry and all of that. It's extraordinary. So therefore, genitals don't define gender. Chromosomes don't define gender. What defines gender then? The person themselves. Very often people ask me who is a man, and I tell them a man is somebody who say they are. A woman is somebody who says they are. But I advisedly don't use the pronoun he or she. I say they. I am getting into the practice of using the pronoun they to mean one person. And it's okay. So, what we are actually looking at then is the way in which we have been making these assumptions about sexuality, about gender, and it is these assumptions that queer readings constantly challenge. I can't possibly deliver a keynote address without mentioning, my Guru Ma, Judith Butler. I don't care what you people think, but ever since I met Guru Ma Judith Butler, she gave me a mantra, because that's what Guru Ma and Guru Dev, they whisper a mantra in your ear. And when I met Judith Butler with flowers in my hand, she said, come here. So I said, yes, Guru Ma. And she said, I'll give you the mantra, practice it. Gender is performative. Guru Ma gave me that mantra, gender is performative. I practice that every day. So what is Judith Butler saying? She is saying that queer is never fully owned. I like that. Queer is never fully owned, but always and only redeployed, twisted, yes, queered from a prior usage and in the direction of urgent and expanding political purposes. Again, a big definition, but I will simply flag a couple of words in that definition. For the first one would be redeployed. Redeployed. So therefore, you take up a text and then the text tells you that I need to be read in a certain way. You disagree with it. You say, no, 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 you are telling me that this is the way in which I should read you. I won't. Because my reading is queer. So therefore, queerness is a redeployment of the politics of reading. Redeployed, twisted, twisted. Your reading is, very often people use twisted as a mark of, it's as a pejorative term. I go, look at that man is twisted. I'm twisted. And I am happy to say I'm twisted. Twisted, queered from a prior usage. It has been used in a certain way. I'm not going to use in that way. I'm going to use it in a slightly different way. In the direction of urgent and expanding political purposes. A lot of people have a problem with Judith Butler. You know what the problems are. So therefore, a lot of people hate Judith Butler because they say that Butler is, she is abnegating the responsibility towards direct action. Yeah, because she is a post-structuralist, she is interested in the politics of language, so therefore a lot of people who are going to say, no, 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 that is the kind of politics that we are not interested in. We are about taking to the streets, we are about having pride walks, we are about, changing legislation, about ground realities. So therefore, playing with language is of no interest to us. I understand where that is coming from, and I have full sympathy for that position, but please let us not reduce politics to just marching on the streets. Marching on the streets is important. I take part in Pride Walk in Calcutta every year since 2012. Marching on the streets is important, but it cannot be the only way of doing politics. There has to be other ways of doing politics. People very often tell me, oh, Niladri, what have you ever done? You go into a class and you talk. Sometimes talking is acting. Judith Butler wrote another book that is slightly less known called Excitable Speech, in which she talks about how talking is doing. So when I tell somebody, I swear, I'm not doing something. I'm just saying, I swear. Or when Christians get married, when they say, I do, they're just saying something, they're not doing it. But that saying becomes an act. So therefore, speaking as politics too. Every one of us in this class, whether we take part in Pride Walk or not, we are all political, in whichever way. So, in the direction of urgent and expanding political purposes, urgent and expanding, every single word is very importantly chosen. It is urgent. And it is urgent, especially in a country like India, where there is a resurgence of patriarchy. There is a resurgence of homophobia. There is a resurgence of transphobia. Doesn't matter what the legislation is, but the ground reality is that daily harassment happens. So therefore, what we are really considering is that it is urgent and expanding political purposes. Expanding. People very often say, and I once had a student who said, sir, it's all very well for you to say that I take part in Pride Walk. But when you're taking part in Pride Walk, when you're openly marching in the streets, aren't you confronting patriarchy? And I say, no. No. Because the mere fact that somebody is taking part in Pride Walk does not automatically denote their sexuality or gender. I have many people who identify as heterosexual who are marching alongside me. So therefore, if you want to get one single message from the Pride Walk, you'll be disappointed. Pride Walk is a wonderful mess, and it is a wonderful mesh. It's a mess and a mesh, both at the same time. Something that I will also say, and I think this is urgent at the moment, is because the Calcutta Pride Walk, much I think like the Delhi Pride Walk, Calcutta Pride Walk and Delhi Pride Walk, they have been consistently political. And when I say consistently political, this is what I mean. Calcutta Pride Walk has never just spoken about the gender or sexual minority. They have spoken for the rights of sex workers. They have spoken for the rights of Palestinians. They have spoken for the rights of the Ukrainians. They have spoken for the rights of the disabled. So therefore, we, those who take part in the Calcutta Pride Walk and the Delhi Pride Walk, we recognize that if we are going to restrict our politics only to gender sexuality, we are being patriarchal. Because you cannot talk about one kind of oppression and say other kinds of oppression don't interest me. So I'm going to talk about the gender sexual marginalized. I'm really not interested in Dalit marginalization. You can't afford to do that. If you're going to talk about marginalization, talk about every kind. You know, one of my most moving experiences was one year when the Calcutta Pride Walk was actually winding down that area of Calcutta called Sonagachi, which is the red light district. And I was running ahead with my DSLR camera trying to capture what's going to happen. And I thought, okay, they are now going to pass by Sonagachi. I really want to see if there is going to be any acknowledgement of that district. You can't imagine what happened. The moment the truck came to Sonagachi, and I'm going to get very emotional when I say this, there were people from the truck who were shouting, sex work is work, sex work is work. That is it. That is the colors of pride. Because colors of pride is not just about the gender marginalized, the sexual marginalized. Pride is about every individual that has been shamed by society. Simply because they are who they are. And who am I to say that, sex work is awful work and somehow a sex worker needs to be, rescued, rehabilitated? What kind of a position of power am I speaking from? That I'm respectable and somebody else is not? So therefore, if the colors of pride have to be truly multicolored, it has to include all kinds of marginalization. What are the theoretical antecedents of pride, or indeed of queerness? There are four. One is, of course, feminism, which is obvious because if there was no feminism, there would not be no queer. I think everybody admits that. Yeah? The second one is the theoretical turn that theory takes, deconstruction and post-structuralism. Without deconstruction, feminism would not be graduating to queer. Because first and second wave feminists were still unfortunately caught up in a certain kind of binary. Yes, patriarchy against us. Queer moves away from that. I'll tell you how. The third, psychoanalysis. Of course, a lot of people acknowledge the fact that Sigmund Freud said a lot of pretty interesting things, a lot of unconsciously patriarchal things. I'll be the first one to admit that Sigmund Freud's theorization has problems, but at least Sigmund Freud did say, didn't he, that a child's sexuality is polymorphous perverse. Polymorphous perverse. Not my term, Sigmund Freud's term. So we are all born with sexuality. But that sexuality, which is amorphous, which is fluid, which goes every direction, somehow that is given an orientation. The question is, why is that orientation necessary? Well, we all know the answer to that. The orientation is necessary because the only kind of sexuality that patriarchy is comfortable with is patriarchy that is not recreative, patriarchy that is procreative. So the only kind of sexuality that will be valid is the sexuality that produces babies. Okay. Now, the fourth one, I'm sure there are others, but I'm just going to flag four. One, I've mentioned feminism. Second is deconstruction. Third is psychoanalysis. The fourth and the last one is historicism. And here, of course, we all know the name that I'll be mentioning, Michel Foucault. Because without Michel Foucault's history of sexuality, we would not be aware of the fact that sexuality has been disciplined. Sexuality has been ordered. Sexuality has been bracketed, categorized. Yes, it has been documented. And it is the documentation of sexuality which is what patriarchy does so well. Michel Foucault is very famous for having said, power is not repressive. Revolutionary statement. Power is not repressive, power is productive. So if power is productive, what does power produce? Power produces knowledge. And what kind of knowledge is it? Is it all knowledge? No, no, no. Power produces that kind of knowledge which is going to serve those in power. I won't allow all knowledge because some knowledge will be problematic. I will only allow that kind of knowledge which is going to serve me. Indian knowledge system. Okay, I'm getting a lot of very knowing giggles over here, so I've made my point. My God, you people are horrible. I just had to mention Indian knowledge system and everybody starts to titter. I am with you. So in the 5 minutes of, because I began speaking at 10:10, so I've only taken like half an hour. So I'll take another 10 minutes or so. Yeah, yeah, 10 minutes. Okay. Um, hmm? Yeah. Okay, I'll stick to that. So basically, now I shall talk about the texts that I think you need to look at. Texts that I have not, because I've gone through your abstracts, so I know what each and every one of you is presenting on. These are the texts that I did not see. So maybe, and the reason why I did not see these texts is because these authors are not regarded as queer. They're all straight. Hmm? So maybe these are the texts that you can look at. Ah. How many of you have already done a paper on American literature? American literature? Yes? Yeah? Yes. Here is a queer text for you. Herman Melville's Moby Dick. Oh, sir, come on. Not Moby Dick. No. Moby Dick. Because if you look at the language that Herman Melville is using to talk about the relationship between Ishmael and Queequeg, who are you not to say that right there in Moby Dick, there is a gay marriage happening? Ah, you haven't remembered that part of the text, have you? So there is actually a scene where they are on the whaling ship Pequod, and and you know they effectively, Queequeg and Ishmael, they effectively get married. They get married. And the morning after, they talk about having spent a night of their heart's honeymoon. Heart's honeymoon? Honeymoon? Did I read that right? I cleared my glasses and then I read again. The word was still there. Honeymoon. So here you have Herman Melville, who is talking about two men getting married and enjoying a honeymoon on a ship. How's that for a queer text? So, Moby Dick, another famous poet who is never talked about in queer studies conferences, Walt Whitman.
Yes, very obvious.
Obviously. And I think it is, I mean, for those of you who would want to look at any one poem by Walt Whitman, just one, I would definitely recommend the one which says, When I Heard at the Close of the Day. It's a short poem, warmly recommended. I shall only read the last few lines of that poem. And look at the language. Look at the way in which Walt Whitman is using language. My dear friend, my lover. Friend, lover, used interchangeably. Very interesting the way the queering works. Friend and lover. My dear friend, my lover, was on his way, was on his way, coming, and at night I heard the hissing rustle of the liquid and sands as directed to me, whispering to congratulate me. For the one I love most lay sleeping by me under the same cover in the cool night. In the stillness in the autumn moonbeams, his face was inclined toward me, and his arm lay lightly around my breast, and that night I was happy. Walt Whitman, the greatest gay poet hiding in plain sight. Nobody talks about him. I would want to mention, since we are in the 19th century, I will mention, we've spent a lot of time with the Anglo-Americans, okay? Let's cross the continent. Let's look at French literature. 1835, Honoré de Balzac, he produces a novel called Père Goriot. Yes, Father Goriot, or Old Goriot in the English translation. What is happening in Old Goriot? You have this young man, very good looking, who comes from the villages to make his life in Paris. He is supposed to be a student of law, but he is not interested in studies, like most students. Because we study because we have to. Okay. So he's not interested in studies. He's interested in becoming a social success. He's a social climber. There are a couple of people who basically, take him under their wings to say, okay, I will show you how to become a social success. One such person is a very dicey character called Vautrin, Vautrin. Vautrin. Vautrin is known as the death dodger. He is a criminal. He is running away from justice. Vautrin has escaped from jail. He's a jailbird. He's a criminal figure. And Vautrin is somebody who tells Eugène, the hero, come, you want to be a success in Paris? I'll show you how to be a success in Paris. So he says, okay, this is a woman that you should marry. First, in order to get married to her, you've got to kill her brother. That's okay, you can kill, right? And the man is like, no. He said, no, you can kill it. Kill the brother, marry the woman, because if you kill the brother, then all the money that the brother is supposed to get, it will come to her. So you will marry into money, so you'll be rich. Very sensible advice. But apart from that, what Vautrin is also doing is he's saying, if you have to define me, you can just say that I am somebody who loves. Okay. And then he says, have you read a play called Venice Preserved? Now, this is so extraordinary because even students of English literature, they haven't read Venice Preserved by Thomas Otway. We only come across that name in a history of literature. Thomas Otway, Venice Preserved. Nobody's ever read it. But why is Vautrin referring to an obscure English play? Because in that play, two men died together. So that is the way in which he is communicating in a very roundabout, queer way. Because nobody ever realizes that Thomas Otway's Venice Preserved is a queer text. Vautrin makes it queer. And he says, have you read Venice Preserved? And Eugene says, no, no, I haven't. Oh, read that play, read that play. Those two men, oh, they are my favorites. What is he doing? In 1835, 90 years ago, he's already querying. He is taking a text and he's repurposing it to express his sexuality. 1835. Which is why, soon after the publication of this book, rumors, French, Indians, we are all the same, rumors started to circulate about Balzac's sexuality. Is he like Vaudreuil? Is he one of those? Because the moment you talk about homosexuality, you become gay yourself, automatically, right? So if I were to talk about preserving of penguins, I become a penguin. Logical? Logical? Yeah? Okay, so Balzac's paired Goriot. Okay, we've done Anglo-American, we've done French. Let's go to ancient India, yeah? Indian knowledge system. My favorite. Let us talk about something that is happening in the Padma Purana. Let us talk about Arjuni. Who the hell is Arjuni now? Well, see, this is the way it goes down. Does everybody know about Arjuni? Yeah? Okay. So, Arjun, you know about Arjun, right? Yeah. So, Arjun, who was just good friends with Krishna, they were extremely good friends. Yeah. Arjun one day tells Krishna, I have heard that you make love really well. And Krishna is like, well, I don't want to brag. And Arjun says, can I have that? Krishna says, are you out of your mind? I can't make love to you. And Arjun says, no, but I really want it. Says, no, sorry, not going to happen. No, we are just good friends. Let's keep it at that. Arjun says, no, but I want it. He says, I really don't know what to do about this. Okay, if you insist, go to Tripura Sundari. She's a goddess. She's a younger form of Kali. Yeah? So go to Tripura Sundari and whatever she says, you do it and then I. So Arjun goes to Tripura Sundari and she says, please, I really want to make out with Krishna. Help me. Tripura Sundari says, oh gosh, okay, strange request. You see those two ponds? There's a pond to the left and there's a pond to the right. He said, yeah. He said, okay, go and take a dip in the pond to the left and see what happens. Arjun rushes into the pond. He emerges as this very hot woman called Arjuni. Very hot woman. Superb. Pamela Anderson on steroids. And she comes and she says, okay, now what do I do? She said, I've done my job. Now you go to Radha, the world's first polyamorous woman. You go to Radha and see what she does. So Arjuni goes to Radha and she says, I really want to make out with your boyfriend. And Radha says, okay, that's inconvenient. I have my helpmaids, because Radha had her ladies in waiting. So she says, okay, so you just take him to Krishna and see whatever he does, I don't care. And so these two women, they take Arjuni. Remember, this is Arjun. Arjun and Asari, yeah? So, yeah, because you do that. So he goes to Krishna. Radha by that time has joined Krishna as well. And Radha, very bad idea, prefers Krishna a better leaf, a pan. Krishna eats the panna. The moment Arjuni sees this amorous play between them, Arjuni cannot be controlled anymore. So I want Krishna right now. Sorry, sorry, please. Then Radha says, oh my God, you're desperate. Okay, bye. So then Radha goes away. Imagine! Radha goes away. Arjuna and Krishna, they go into the bushes. There they play Ludo. And then after spending about half an hour, they emerge again, disheveled. And he says, oh God, that was amazing. And Krishna said, okay. And then he goes back to Tripura Sundari and he says, oh, I'm exhausted, but it was amazing. And Tripura Sundari says, okay, that's enough. I don't want to hear anymore. Take a dip in that right pond. Yeah? He takes a dip in the right pond. He emerges as Arjun. Now here is the thing, and this is the most interesting part. Krishna meets Arjun afterwards and says, don't tell anybody. Which is why you haven't heard this story. Because we don't know. Queerness hiding in plain sight in our Puranas. This is not the Indian knowledge system that I think UGC had in mind. I would end absolutely by again referring you to Ruskin Bond's novel, Delhi is Not Far. I have actually published an entire paper because I've got nothing better to do. I have published an entire paper on Delhi is Not Far, which I've got for you because I'm a nice person. So if anybody wants to have an idea as to how querying is done, here it is. You can take it home, but only after you've taken pictures of it with your cell phones. Thank you so much for your attention. And thank you for politely laughing at all my failed jokes. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Niladri. One thing that I'm